"You need to be realistic about this, Clara," my mother said. Her voice, smooth and polished as the Carrara marble countertops in her Boston kitchen, carried no warmth, only a placid, unshakable certainty that what she was about to say was not an opinion, but an indisputable fact. "Brooke's book launch isn't the right venue for you. It's a professional crowd. And honestly, your presence would just be complicated." I stood by the island, the cloying, funereal scent of lilies from a ridiculously oversized arrangement filling the air. The late afternoon sun streamed through the immaculate bay window of their Beacon Hill brownstone, illuminating a universe of dust motes dancing in the air. Each one, I thought with a strange detachment, seemed to have more freedom, more right to occupy space than I did in that moment. "My name is Clara Rossi, and I'm 28 years old. My life is a world away from this sun-drenched, silent kitchen. I'm the sous chef at Il Posto, a well-respected but perpetually under-the-radar Italian restaurant tucked away on a cobblestone side street in the North End. My existence is a frantic ballet of 16-hour days, paychecks that barely cover my rent, and the constant comforting smell of garlic, olive oil, and yeast clinging to my clothes, my hair, my skin. It's a hard life, but it's mine." For years, I had accepted my role in the family ecosystem. I was the other daughter, the quiet, artistic one who didn't quite fit the meticulously curated mold of the Rossi family. My younger sister, Brooke, just 2 years my junior, was the star around which our family's universe revolved. She was the golden child, blessed with the kind of effortless blonde beauty and sharp, Ivy League intelligence that our parents, Eleanor and Richard, saw as a direct reflection of their own success. She'd graduated with honors from Harvard Law, was a rising associate at a top-tier firm, and had just written a book on intellectual property law in the tech sector. My parents spoke of this book as if it were the next great American novel, a testament to her singular genius, rather than what it likely was. A well-researched, dry-as-dust legal text designed to make her look like an authority. But this conversation felt different. This wasn't the familiar, dull ache of my culinary school graduation being overlooked because it conflicted with Brooke's LSAT prep weekend. It wasn't the quiet sting of my first glowing review in a local paper being ignored because Brooke had just been assigned a high-profile case. This was a formal, calculated erasure. This was an excommunication from what my mother was calling, with breathless reverence, the most important night of Brooke's career. "Complicated how?" I asked. My voice was quieter than I intended, and I felt my hands instinctively clench and unclench, a nervous energy I usually worked out over a stubborn piece of dough, or by furiously whisking a hollandaise. My mother sighed, a delicate, theatrical sound of exasperation. It was the sigh of a patient teacher, explaining a simple concept to a particularly slow, perhaps learning-disabled student. "Clara, darling, the guest list is a who's who of the Boston legal and political scene. Senior partners from her firm, federal judges, even a few city councilors and state representatives. The firm is backing this. They're spending a fortune at the Fairmont Copley Plaza. This is a launch party, yes, but it's really about networking. It's a strategic move to position her for partnership. It's about cementing her place in that world." "Oh, weh." She paused, and her eyes did a slow, critical scan of me, from my worn-out non-slip Dansko clogs to my simple ponytail that was already starting to frizz in the late summer humidity. "And you're from a different world. People will ask what you do, and you'll say you cook for a living. It's just not the right image for the night. It could create an awkward narrative. We want the focus to be entirely on Brooke." An awkward narrative. The words hung in the air between us like the scent of the lilies, beautiful and suffocating. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that cooking for a living was an art, a science, a grueling craft that demanded more discipline and creativity than she could possibly imagine. I wanted to describe the relentless pressure of a Saturday night service, the symphony of chaos, the burns that littered my forearms like a roadmap of my dedication. But I knew it was useless. This wasn't about the merits of our respective professions. It was about status, and in their world, I was a liability. "Does Brooke know you're telling me not to come?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion churning in my gut. Her eyes flickered, the only crack in her perfectly composed facade. "We all discussed it. It was a family decision. Your father and I agree. Brooke just wants a smooth, perfect night. She's under so much pressure. Honestly, Clara, you should be relieved. The pressure would be immense for you to try and fit in. It would be uncomfortable for you. A smooth, perfect night. unburdened by my complicated, non-prestigious existence. She was doing me a favor, you see, saving me from my own inadequacy. I bent down and picked up my worn messenger bag from the polished hardwood floor. I get it, I said, the words tasting like ash. I knew you would, she said, her smile instant and full of relief, as if I had just passed a difficult test of her patience. You've always been so practical. Practical. Her word for compliant. Her word for someone who knew their place and didn't make a fuss. As I walked out of their meticulously restored brownstone and onto the gas-lit cobblestone street, something inside me didn't just shift. It fractured. The years of quiet resentment, of swallowed hurt, of making myself smaller so Brooke's light could shine brighter, all of it coalesced into a single, cold, hard point of clarity. Brooke's party was in 3 weeks, on a Saturday. 3 weeks for them to celebrate their perfect daughter while I was expected to simply and quietly cease to exist. The drive back to my tiny, loud apartment in the North End felt like traveling between dimensions. Their world was one of polished silver, hushed tones and quiet prestige. Mine was one of clanging pans, shouting orders, and the vibrant, messy chaos of a working kitchen. The pattern had been set in childhood and reinforced at every turn. I remembered being 15, saving for months from my grueling job as a busser at a greasy spoon diner to buy my first set of professional-grade Japanese knives. I had researched them for weeks, drooling over catalogs. When the heavy package arrived, I had unwrapped them with the reverence of a religious rite. They were beautiful, perfectly balanced, an extension of my hand. A week later, Brooke, then 13, threw an epic tantrum. It wasn't fair. Clara got something expensive and special, and she got nothing. It didn't matter that I had paid for them myself, with money earned from scraping dried ketchup off plates. To appease her, my parents bought her a membership to an exclusive junior tennis club that cost 10 times what my knives did. When Brooke turned 18, a brand new metallic blue BMW was waiting in the driveway, a giant red bow on the hood. It was to help her get to her prestigious summer internship at a downtown law firm. When I had asked for help with a down payment on a reliable 5-year-old Honda to get to my 5 a.m. prep shifts across town, my father had sat me down for a long lecture on financial responsibility and the character-building nature of earning things for yourself. I was so lost in the bitter tide of memory that I almost missed it. Taped to the window of a closed-down bakery, its own dreams turned to dust, was a brightly colored poster, flapping in the breeze. New England Culinary Showcase, a competition for the region's rising stars. IBSEX. It was the most prestigious cooking competition in the region, a star maker for aspiring chefs. The prize was $20,000 and, more importantly, a feature in Food and Wine magazine. I'd always seen the flyers, heard the buzz among other cooks, but I'd always been too intimidated, too exhausted, too beaten down by my own self-doubt, a doubt so expertly planted and cultivated by my family to even consider entering. I pulled the car over, my heart starting to pound a frantic, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I read the fine print. The final round, judged live, was scheduled for Saturday, October 24th, the exact same night as Brooke's party. An idea, wild and terrifying and utterly unlike the practical Clara my mother knew, began to take root. It felt like a spark landing in a pile of dry tinder that had been accumulating for 28 years. If they were going to write me out of their story, I would write my own. And I would make sure it was a story they couldn't ignore. That night, I didn't go home. I went to the one place that felt like a sanctuary, Leo's cluttered, chaotic loft in an old warehouse building in Somerville. Leo was a jazz musician who played bass in 3 different bands and understood, on a cellular level, the struggle of chasing a creative dream in a world that only valued practicality and profit. He was the only person who knew the full, unedited history of my family's dynamics. He opened the door, took one look at my face, and said, "Eleanor, what did she do now?" I collapsed onto his worn velvet couch, and the whole story poured out of me, the conversation, the phrase awkward narrative, the casual, devastating cruelty of it all. He listened patiently, his usual frantic energy stilled, a thundercloud gathering in his dark eyes. "They actually said you'd be a complication?" he asked, his voice a low growl of disbelief. "That's not just rude, Clara. That's cruel. That's some next-level psychological warfare." "She said I should be relieved," I told him, the words still stinging, like she was doing me a favor. "Oh, that's the classic move. The abuser's grace. They hurt you, then tell you it's for your own good so you thank them for it. It's insane. So, what are you going to do?" Sit at home and rewatch Chef's Table while they toast to St. Brooke of the Holy Gavel? I took a deep breath, the spark of my idea still glowing, needing his encouragement to become a flame. I'm thinking of entering the New England Culinary Showcase. The final is the same night as her party. Leo stared at me for a long moment. I could see the idea processing behind his eyes. Then, a slow, wide grin spread across his face. He didn't whoop. It was more profound than that. He just nodded, a look of deep, satisfying rightness on his face. "Yes," he said, his voice quiet and intense. "That's it. That's the most brilliant, perfect, poetic thing I've ever heard. You have to do it, Clara. You have to burn it all down with a perfectly executed bechamel sauce." The next morning I filled out the application. The entry fee was $200 I barely had, but I paid it. I had to submit a written proposal for a 3-course meal. For my main course, I proposed my tribute to Nana. Ciopino rimaneggiato, a reimagined, elevated version of the rustic fish stew. I wrote about its history, about my grandmother, about what it meant to me. I poured all the passion I couldn't express to my family onto those pages. A week later, I got the email. I had been accepted into the preliminary rounds. The spark had become a fire. For the next 2 weeks, my life became a blur of caffeine and adrenaline. My world shrank to the kitchen at Il Posto. I worked my regular, grueling shifts, and then, as the last customers left and the other cooks stumbled out into the night, I would stay. My boss, a tough but fair Sicilian man named Sal, saw the fire in my eyes. He was old school, a man of few words, but he understood passion. When I explained what I was doing, he just grunted, then nodded. "Use whatever you need from the pantry," he said, a rare smile touching his lips. "Within reason, Rossi. Don't go using up all my saffron. And don't burn my kitchen down. And make me proud." Night after night I experimented, refined, and obsessed. I practiced my knife cuts until they were flawless. I made gallons of fish stock, simmering it for hours to extract every drop of flavor. I worked on the ciopino until my hands ached and my palate was exhausted. One night I almost gave up. It was 3 a.m. The broth tasted flat and lifeless, and I sat on a milk crate in the alley behind the restaurant, the cold air biting at my skin, ready to cry. I felt the weight of my mother's words, her certainty of my inadequacy. Maybe she was right. Then I remembered Nana's voice, a warm, husky sound in my memory. "A little more salt, cara mia. Life always needs a little more salt. And don't be afraid of the heat." I went back inside and tried again. This time I added a pinch more salt, a little more chili flake for heat, and a squeeze of fresh lemon juice at the very end to brighten it. I tasted it. It was perfect. It tasted like home. It tasted like victory. The preliminary rounds were held over a weekend. They were nerve-wracking. I was competing against chefs from bigger, fancier restaurants in Boston and Providence, chefs with more resources and recognition. But my food, honest and flavorful, got me through. The judges' faces, initially skeptical of the unknown sous chef from the small North End joint, softened with each bite. I made it to the finals, top 4. The week before the competition, the heavy, cream-colored envelope arrived at my apartment. The official invitation to Brooke's launch party. Inside, on the thick, embossed cardstock, was the handwritten note from my mother. "We have you down on the guest list, of course, but knowing how busy you are, we completely understand you won't be able to make it. So incredibly proud of Brooke." The performative inclusion, the pre-written excuse for my absence, was the final twist of the knife. It was designed to make them look magnanimous while ensuring I knew I wasn't really wanted. I taped it to my stainless steel fridge, right next to my prep list for the competition. It became my fuel. The night of the final was a surreal, out-of-body experience. The event was held in a large, industrial chic hall in the Seaport District. The air buzzed with energy. A panel of 5 judges, giants of the New England food scene, were seated at a long table on a raised platform. The hall was packed with food critics, bloggers, restaurant owners, and industry insiders. Leo was in the front row, giving me a thumbs up. Sal was in the back, leaning against a pillar, his arms crossed, watching me with an unreadable expression. As I stood at my gleaming stainless steel station, the heat of the induction burners on my face, I could feel hundreds of eyes on me. I took a deep breath and focused, tuning out the noise, letting the familiar rhythm of my knives on the board ground me. Mirepoix, fine dice, garlic, paper thin, saffron, bloom in warm broth. The muscle memory took over. I thought of Brooke, just a few blocks away at the Fairmont, smiling for cameras in a world of muted chatter and clinking champagne glasses. Here, there was fire and steam and the sharp, beautiful aroma of my heritage. I poured every ounce of my frustration, my years of feeling invisible, my love for my Nana, into that dish. Then came the judging. One by one, they tasted my creation. They were silent, their faces impassive poker masks. My heart hammered against my ribs, so hard I thought it might break through. Finally, the head judge, the renowned and notoriously harsh Boston food critic Julian Croft, put down his fork. He looked directly at me, his gaze so intense it felt like it was pinning me to the spot. The camera zoomed in on my face. "There's a story in this dish," he said, his voice deep and resonant, filling the suddenly silent hall. "It's not just food, it's memory, it's history. There's a generosity of spirit here, a depth of flavor that can't be taught in any culinary school. It has to be lived. It has to be inherited. Young lady, this is extraordinary." I won. The moment they announced my name, the world seemed to slow down, the roar of the crowd turning into a distant, pleasant hum. I was handed a giant check and a ridiculously oversized trophy. I remember mumbling some thanks to Sal, to Leo, to my Nana, my mind a complete joyful blank. But the real explosion happened later. Unbeknownst to me, a scout for a popular food-focused YouTube channel called Urban Bites had been at the event. They weren't interested in the whole 2-hour competition, just in capturing small, authentic, viral-worthy moments. At precisely 9 p.m., they posted a 60-second clip, Julian Croft's powerful, unscripted speech, the camera cutting to my tearful, utterly shocked reaction as my name was announced. The video was titled simply, "Chef's Soulful Dish Stuns Judges. This is what passion looks like." By the time I got home around 11 p.m., after a loud, joyous celebration with Leo and my work crew from Il Posto at a dive bar, my phone was vibrating so violently on my countertop, it sounded like a trapped animal. The clip was going viral. The comments poured in by the hundreds, then thousands. "You can see her whole heart in that dish. This is what real passion looks like, not some stuffy corporate party. Forget the stuffy lawyers, this is the sister I want to know." The internet, in its strange and unpredictable way, had chosen a side in a story it didn't even fully know. The first call was from my mother. Her voice was sharp, laced with a bewildered fury I had never heard before. "Clara, what on earth is going on? My phone is blowing up. People here, at Brooke's party, are showing me this video of you. On their phones. Here, at the party." "I won a cooking competition, Mom," I said, my voice steady for the first time in what felt like my entire life. "But it's everywhere. On everyone's phone. People are whispering. They're talking about you, not Brooke. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? You've completely hijacked her night." "Her night?" I laughed, a raw, unfamiliar sound that came from deep in my belly. "The night I wasn't welcome at? You can't lock me out of the house and then get angry when I build my own. This has nothing to do with you or Brooke." Brooke called next, and I could hear the panicked din of the party behind her. Her voice was shaking with a rage that bordered on hysteria. "You did this on purpose. You planned this whole thing to ruin my launch, to humiliate me." Actually, Brooke, I planned it because it was the only way I could stomach the fact that my own family didn't want me at yours. You wanted a smooth, perfect night without me. It sounds like you got it. What happens outside the 4 walls of your party isn't your concern, or your business." I hung up before she could respond. The story then took a turn I never could have predicted. A local investigative journalist from the Boston Globe, a woman named Sarah Jenkins, became intrigued by the 2 sisters, 2 parties narrative that was exploding online. On Monday, she published a beautifully written human interest piece contrasting the 2 events, the lavish, corporate, sponsored book launch, which she described as a sterile exercise in networking, and the grassroots, passion-fueled culinary victory, which she called a testament to authentic talent. The article was overwhelmingly sympathetic to me, painting a picture of an overlooked underdog who had found her moment in the spotlight. But Sarah Jenkins was a good journalist, and something about the perfect book from the 2 6-year-old associate seemed a little too polished. She made a few discreet calls to sources within the legal publishing world. On Tuesday, a follow-up story broke, this time on the front page of the business section. The headline was devastating. Boston's newest legal star didn't write her own story, an investigation into corporate ghostwriting at top law firms. The article revealed with damning evidence, including emails from a disgruntled former publishing assistant, that Brooke's high-profile book was almost entirely the work of a well-known legal ghostwriter. The firm had paid a fortune for it to boost her profile and attract high-tech clients, a common but ethically murky practice they preferred to keep in the shadows. The fallout was catastrophic and immediate. Brooke's law firm, facing a public relations nightmare, put her on indefinite administrative leave. The publisher issued a vague statement about editorial collaborations and quietly pulled the book from distribution. Her perfect night, the one for which I wasn't good enough, was now a toxic footnote in a story about her professional fraud. Meanwhile, my life was transforming at a dizzying pace. The YouTube channel that posted the original clip offered me my own web series. Food and Wine magazine called, wanting to do the full-length feature promised to the competition winner. The editor mentioned, with a hint of journalistic glee, that they had initially planned a small, obligatory piece on Brooke's book launch, but had killed it the moment my story broke. A prestigious literary agent from New York reached out, asking if I'd ever considered writing a cookbook based on my grandmother's heirloom recipes. My father called me a week later. He didn't yell. He sounded tired, hollowed out, like an old building whose foundation had cracked. We met at a quiet coffee shop in the Back Bay. "We made a mistake, Clara," he said, staring into his black coffee. "We were so focused on Brooke's version of success. The degrees, the money, the prestige, we didn't see yours. We didn't see you." "I know," I said. "She's devastated," he continued, his voice cracking slightly. "Her career is in ruins. The firm is going to let her go. Her fiancé is reevaluating. She feels like you did this to her." She did this to herself, Dad," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "And you all helped. You built her up on a throne so high she thought she'd never fall, that the rules didn't apply to her. I didn't push her. I just stopped letting you all push me down into the cellar. It was the first honest conversation we'd had in years, but it didn't fix anything. An apology couldn't erase decades of being made to feel like a pale imitation of a daughter. 2 years have passed since that night. I am now the executive chef and proud part owner of my own restaurant in Cambridge, named Nana's Table. It's small, loud, and always booked. My cookbook, The Invisible Ingredient, Finding Yourself in Your Family's Recipes, was a surprise New York Times bestseller. The web series, North End Soul, has a devoted following and has been nominated for a James Beard Award. My success wasn't born from a desire for revenge, though I admit that was the initial spark. It grew from a desperate, long-suppressed need to prove my own worth, primarily to myself. My parents sold the Beacon Hill brownstone and moved to a gated golf community in Florida. The social fallout in Boston, the quiet whispers and averted gazes, was too much for them to bear. Brooke's engagement to her wealthy fiancé ended. After being let go from her firm, she moved to Chicago to start over, taking a paralegal job far from the spotlight she once craved. She texted me once, 6 months ago, on the anniversary of the competition. It just said, "I'm in therapy. I'm trying to figure out who I am without the applause." I thought for a long time before I replied. Me too. Sometimes, the greatest validation comes not from finally being invited to the party, but from building a life so full and authentic that you become the party everyone wants to be at. My family wanted me to be a footnote in my sister's story. Instead, I learned how to write my own. And I discovered that my story, the one they never bothered to read, the one seasoned with garlic and salt and tears, was the one the world was hungry for all along.